7 colours, 2 tool heads. What on earth is going on? Let's go. As you can see, this is the new Sovol M1D. This is the open plan version, which is going to be called Essential, and it's good for most non-engineering materials. There will be an enclosed version out too. It wasn't available when the prototype machine was sent out. And yes, this we see here is a pre-production machine. There are very few of these actually in existence yet, so it's probably not going to be a final design, although it's probably very close because it does seem quite finalised. I will stick some price details on screen for the M1D's Kickstarter launch. I don't intend for this video to be a sales pitch. I think you're all smart enough to figure out whether you want to buy things after seeing a technical overview, which I intend for this to be. But if you do decide to go check out the Sovol M1D after finding this video useful, then it costs you nothing and it earns me something if you use the links in the description. I'm also making this video under my new Open Hardware Evaluation specification. This is new. It's a standardized framework defining clear rules for manufacturer transparency and reviewer independence, because I really think we need manufacturer transparency and reviewer independence. I'm sure you agree. And Sovol also agrees, actually, because they have formally agreed to these terms. A link to the full open source spec is in the description, and I invite you to go and read it. Therefore, it's now redundant for me to say that Sovol have not seen this video before you have, and they have had no creative input. And of course, I haven't been paid to make it. Now, let's actually look at the M1D that's taking up, well, my entire desk. Fair play to Sovol for actually making this machine. You'll hear the word ambitious a lot throughout this video. It is not an understatement. On the right side of this machine, we have no less than 6 tool heads that can be picked out by the TOOLCHANGER tool head thing. And if a tool changer isn't enough with 6 tool heads, apparently Sovol thought, let's mix that with an IDEX. If that makes your brain hurt, imagine watching it working. The weird thing is, it actually kind of makes sense, or it can be made to make sense. If you're predominantly using 2 colours, or you're using, say, a support filament, it actually does make sense. But let's look at the rest of the hardware on the M1D. We covered the IDEX thing. The dockable tools on the other side are remote extruder designs with individual heaters and fans. This space-saving approach, we're only just starting to see this emerge in commercial machines, but actually it was originally popularised by Mihai Designs. There's a bit of history there for you. You're welcome. This method relies on a motorised locking mechanism that clicks firmly into place on the filament. Creality and Bondtech both use some version of this in their new machines. IDEX natively has a Z problem, and most people don't think about it. Let me show you what I mean. We have an active Z height mechanism on the left tool head. Why? Well, if you're doing mirror or copy mode on the IDEX, then you have a bed mesh on the whole bed, and you have 2 tool heads on that bed at the same time, operating in different places, but they're on the same gantry. You have exactly 3 ways of dealing with this height discrepancy. You can either ignore it and have a terrible first layer, which has been the default in the past with a lot of IDEX machines, or you can tilt the bed, which I think some machines do, or you can do this that Sovol have done. Decoupling the entire tool head and putting it on its own Z-axis, like a really mini Z-axis, you can just completely circumvent the problem. And it actually seems to work. By the way, if you are generally interested in 3D printing, I don't just do reviews, so it's probably worth clicking VR. Looking at the feeding mechanism of the printer, this is an auto feeder, kind of like the Snapmaker has, but it's also an active buffer, meaning it pushes filament even during the print. It also actively unloads, so you have a completely hands-off unloading process for up to 6 filaments where it delivers the filament right back to where you inserted it. That does of course mean that you have to re-reel the filament yourself. It's just on a passive stand, so it's not going to put itself back on the reel. The feeder is actually really complicated. It works by means of a cam mechanism, selecting each channel kind of in a way that reminds me of the Prusa MMU3. It seems to work fine too, and that was something that was quite robust in the Prusa MMU3, so whilst it's entirely new, entirely ambitious, if they've implemented it correctly, it should be okay. Hot end temperatures max out at 300 degrees C, and the standard nozzles are hardened steel. You're almost certainly going to want the enclosed version to make the most of that top end of that range. The enclosure also has 60 degrees C max active heating, so this puts some high temperature materials within reach, but 300 on the nozzles isn't quite enough for others. I think most people won't mind or indeed expect that of a tool changer. I'm not currently able to test the heated chamber or enclosure obviously because I don't have it yet. One thing you might not have clocked is that this is not a Core XY printer. We're so used to seeing Core XY kinematics on box-shaped printers that we forget that other types can and have existed, like the Ender 5. But this is Cartesian, like the Ender 5. Bed slingers are also similarly Cartesian. That configuration, in conjunction with the fact it's an IDEX, means that you have two sets of belts for the X gantry and then an Ender 5 kind of setup for the Y gantry. This means that you have a lot of weight on the Y axis of the movement, with a stepper on either end, and they're not small steppers either. So with the default accelerations, the printer is quite capable of shaking the table quite a lot. You can, as I have, drop the accelerations quite easily in the Clipper config, and that doesn't really seem to significantly slow down the print times. The Z axis is actually the same setup as the SV08 with 4 independent steppers, so it has to do quad gantry leveling, but it doesn't seem to suffer the same annoyances as the SV08 did on release with the leveling and the bed mesh, but that was of course a few years ago. Speaking of bed mesh, we have the eddy sensor that Sovol favours, and I also favour it. I wish more manufacturers would use eddy sensors on their machines. There is nothing anywhere near as satisfying as watching an eddy probe mesh a bed, especially a big bed. Multiple active tool heatsink fans and 2 particularly enthusiastic part cooling fans. They do kind of make a bit of a symphony. Another not so much ambitious, but definitely a real quality of life feature, and in my opinion quite a high-end feature for this price point, and I'm not sure that many printers, if any, actually use it off the shelf. I've never seen it in a printer before. It's a camera for nozzle alignment. I was obviously aware of this method existing, but I've never seen it implemented before in a stock off-the-shelf printer. It works quite seamlessly, and you can see it doing its thing on the Clipper console, which is really cool, and this brings us to the software and UI. Sovol have always been one of the more open source aligned companies, and I've checked the situation with the M1D, and I'm happy to confirm that the machine as it stands has root access by SSH, full access to mainsail by IP address, and Sovol intends to share the files exactly as they have done with previous machines. The on-screen UI is very straightforward once you figure it out, and the screen is quite sizable and shows a fair bit of data on runtime. You can also batch load and unload filaments too, which is quite a good quality of life feature. TPU works fine through the tool changer side of the machine. Sovol recommends that you use it on the tool changer side of the machine. Not sure why. If you want lower than 95A shore hardness, you might need to start feeding it directly in the top rather than through the feeder. I tested 40D, which is about 90A, and it worked just about through the feeder. I don't think I'd want to go any lower than that, not through the feeder at least. Part of summing up is to try to manage your expectations. There will be people who've dealt with Kickstarter before, and there will be people who've bought Sovol printers before. Both of you will have awareness of what I'm about to say. Sovol is tackling a huge generational leap in mechanical complexity in this machine, not just on one front, but on many fronts simultaneously. This, of course, increases the risk of teething problems. I'm happy and honestly a little surprised to report that on my unit, in spite of it being a prototype, there are no notable points of friction with the exception of some software additions that I've asked for, most of which will be settled by release. In spite of that, I'm inclined to warn you that a potentially manually built prototype may not suffer from teething issues that happen when Sovol scales manufacturing up. I'm satisfied that they have built a robust system here that already has a good amount of failure detection, for example, the ability to retry a dock if it fails, but I very much don't have a crystal ball to see whether they will or won't have quality issues on the assembly line. This is one of the risks that you take by being first. I think the M1D has landed at a perfect time for Sovol. If you look at the market right now, you have nothing directly rivaling the Sovol M1D. By that, I mean Bondtech's IDEX is currently an involved assembly process as a kit, and the Prusa version requires you to buy or own a Core 1, and that's still a kit. Snapmaker's U1 is honestly great, if not absolutely unbeatable as a platform right now, and FlashForge's Creator 5 is honestly fine too, but those have 4 tools, and we're starting to see people seeing IDEX and getting an appetite for more colours without spending a lot of money and having to assemble it. And then here's the Sovol M1D. The right price, the right timing. I think it will be popular. Anyway, as I said earlier, I will link the Kickstarter in the description, and once again, I will remind you to use the link if you found this video useful. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments. This is not everything I have planned for the M1D. I have another video scheduled soon, but I also think we'll be seeing me using it and updating you on the experience quite regularly, so do subscribe. I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.